I'm talking. So I asked you to do some reading. It's essentially the section of the textbook that's based on cancer and cell division. So let's just move on here. Again, just information. I would be completely lying if I told you that I made these notes up. I did not. Someone who is knowledgeable in biology made these notes up. Many of the physics notes I made up, right? So we kind of pick on our expertise depending on what we're covering. Again, in terms of this reading out of the book and making some of your notes by answering the questions, and then at the end of this lesson, I'm going to have you go back and copy those terms that are in bold. I think they're normally just in the margin there, so you know you can easily go and get them. Again, the biology test. Again, I'd be lying if I told you I made up the biology test, right? Even on the cells, right? And that's because again, I don't know what is proper to ask, but this is the type of stuff that there's more definitions than there would be in the physics, right? In the physics, it's more doing. It's do array diagram, solve the problem for finding the focal length, etc., etc. So this is a little different. So your preparation is going to be on how well you do what I suggest you do in terms of go back and copy those terms into your notes. Make sure you know those terms. Now, cancer is one of those, one of those diseases that everybody has probably an acquaintance or a personal situation. So hopefully it doesn't turn into too much of a discussion where it becomes too personal. I want to talk about the science behind it, but there will be opportunity maybe at the end to ask questions. I know a little bit about it, a personal situation for myself. My sister-in-law, she passed away, goodness, that'd be about 3 years ago. And it was cervical cancer, right? So everybody's got a situation and a story. Let's go through the science first, and then if you have questions perhaps that you became aware of in a situation that we can maybe try to explain in terms of the science that we've talked about, we'll do that near the end, okay? So cancer is a group of diseases in which certain cells of the body grow and divide out of control. I don't know in terms of a general grade 10 student population how much you know about the way cancer functions. Again, because it's fairly common, you may have learned in discussion with parents, et cetera, some of these terms, but essentially there's a malfunction in the DNA which then causes that cell cycle to continually happen without the interphase period, right? That interphase period where the cell just kind of sits there doing its thing. And in that video, we had learned that the interphase period is very long. Some of them it's shorter depending on what the function is. Some of them the interphase period is indefinite, like I think it was brain cells and muscle cells where they just don't divide. So if that interphase period is disrupted for some reason because of a genetic defect of some sort, then that cell cycle continues and continues, and you have continuous cell growth. If we have that, we have something called a tumor, in which we have a mass of cells that may invade the surrounding tissues and organs and disrupt their functions. You can have tumors that are not cancerous, all right? And I think they're called benign tumors, all right? And they have, again, a continual cell growth, but they don't tend to invade surrounding tissue, right? It seems to be localized for some reason, and surgery can then be removed, or can be done to remove that particular type of tumor without worry of spread, right? If you have a tumor that is what is called malignant, then it is one in which it does spread those cells to other locations, and that's a problem, all right? That's an issue. Okay. And that machine is making noise. Get rid of that there. So some forms of cancer can be triggered by environmental factors, UV radiation, and that just stands for ultraviolet light, perhaps coming from the sun or from tanning beds. Chemicals, I'm not a fan of that term. I'll talk about that in a moment. Tobacco smoke, etc., right? Asbestos is another one. There's all kinds. The term chemicals I'm not a fan of because as a chemist, really anything that you want to talk about, right, in terms of matter is made up of chemicals, right? Water is a chemical, and it's not a cancer-causing chemical. So maybe it would be better if we wrote cancer-causing chemicals. There are many chemicals that are believed to be associated with cancer, and that tests have been done on. I'll tell you one that a couple of them that we came across when I was in university taking chemistry. There's a chemical called benzene. It's a liquid. It's a very important industrial chemical and very useful in various processes. And it's a suspected carcinogen. All right. Now the term carcinogen, we haven't come across it here, but when you go back and write the bold words, carcinogen is there. A carcinogen is essentially a chemical that is believed to be cancer causing. And so we were working with the benzene, and we were told to be very careful. Studies are ongoing that on the potential carcinogenic effects of benzene. So we had to wear gloves. We didn't need to wear respirators, but we had to be very careful when we were using that. So there are many chemicals that are believed to be cancer causing. Yep. Well, cure for cancer, that's a pretty big term. In terms of a cure, no, because they're desperately trying to again, we're now out of the realm of my ability, right? The answer to that is no, they haven't. I guess as someone who's a non-biologist but knows a little bit about science, my answer to that would be different cancers, even though they're fundamentally similar, have differing mechanisms, which means there's not going to be one magic cure-all for cancer. It's actually a group of diseases that have similar properties in terms of the way the cells divide out of control, but in what way to control that is different for each type of cancer, all right? So it becomes a very complex problem to solve. That's my non-biologist, little knowledge of science answer to that, right? Okay, yep?
Now there's like different types of cancer and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If you had one type of cancer and then you got another type of disease
Mm-hmm.
that reproduced faster than that cancer, would you still have that cancer?
No. If you were unfortunate enough to have multiple types of cancer, no, it wouldn't necessarily take over. They would likely, again, I'm not a qualified person to be truly answering this, but let's say you had a cancer in one part of your body and a different type of cancer formed in another part of your body.
I don't know how.
Yeah, no, I would have no idea. I wouldn't have an answer to that. Like if you had a different type of cancer start to take place where you already had cancerous growth, again, I don't know. I would have no idea. You're now beyond my scope of knowledge. I don't know. Yep.
How brain cells divide if like, your brain's small when you're a baby, and then when you grow up, how can it be?
I would love to answer that question. I'm going to write that one down because that's a good one. So I'll ask Mr. Edgar or something like that in order to take care of that. Does your brain get bigger as you grow up? I would say it does, but you know what? Babies got pretty big heads, right? Eyes don't get any bigger either. So is the head big enough to the point? No, because a baby's head is little, like a little preemie's baby head is little. So if you don't have more cells, do the cells get bigger themselves, or is there some cell growth to the point where you reach a maximum and then you don't grow anymore? Do you see what I'm saying? I've heard various things where they say, you know, and this is a big one, right? They talk about marijuana use, right? And that marijuana use, the latest one I heard on the radio is that it's not good for teenagers developing brains because they now believe that the brain isn't fully mature until you're about 24 or 25. So, nope, it's 24, 25, that's what I heard. I don't know. The brain is changing according to brain smart people, scientists, but I don't know how. Again, it's beyond the scope of what I have, right? So when they say that the brain cells don't divide like in that video, does it mean after you're 24 they don't produce anymore? Perhaps that's what they mean, right? I don't know. I don't know. I agree with you. I'm giving you all the information that I have. I would say, I don't know. Is it that they grow up until you're 25? You know, that type of thing? Yep. You mean the silvery metal? That was mercury. No, I don't believe so. Mercury is, I believe mercury is a metal that if you ingest it, it tends to accumulate in a certain part of your brain. For some reason, the mercury tends to, it doesn't like you got blobs of metal or anything like that in your head, but you would have an accumulation of mercury atoms in a certain part of your brain, and then it deteriorates that part of the brain function, and a large amount of it would bring on hallucinations, etc., but that doesn't have to do, no, it's not a carcinogen. I don't believe it is. From the information that I have, I don't believe it is, but I could be wrong. Again, I'm on the edges of the knowledge that I have. I'm right there on the fringe. All right? If we could keep going, these are great questions, and I don't mind entertaining them, but let's keep rolling, and then we can entertain some after I'm done recording so that the rest of the people don't have to listen to me babbling on about things I don't know. All right. There are many, sometimes persons' genetics make them more susceptible to developing cancer. Again, something that I have heard, read a little bit about, but don't have a lot of knowledge. Some of the latest theories on cancer development is that some scientists believe that our bodies, because every time a cell divides, there's a chance for the DNA, when it becomes a double strand, for there to be a mistake in that coding of the DNA. And if there's a mistake, they call that a mutation. And normally mutations, just the cell doesn't survive if it creates a mutation. In other words, the code to keep the cell alive is so faulty, the cell dies and it's nothing. But if the code is incorrect to the point where it produces one of these malfunctioning cells that then divides out of control, then you have a cancerous cell. But some scientists now believe, some biologists now believe, that our body's immune system has the ability to spot these errors in the cells and to get rid of them from our immune system, much like we get rid of a cold virus or a flu virus. So some scientists believe that our bodies are continually having mutations formed, but then our immune system comes in and kills it and takes care of it and doesn't allow it to divide out of control. It's obvious, maybe from your experience, that there are scenarios where a family is susceptible to cancer because many family members get cancer. So on that idea, some scientists believe that their immune system is such that it's not as efficient to remove those mutations as they're being formed, and therefore the cancer has an ability to grow out of control before the immune system comes and takes it away and gets rid of those cells. So some people are more genetically susceptible to cancer, which is why when you go to the doctor and let's say you're having a mole checked or something and they're wondering if it's skin cancer, they will always ask about your family history. Is there any history of cancer in your family? And then that gives them kind of a heads up to keep an eye out for things a little more carefully for you than they would for others. All right? Again, this genetic predisposition and that little thing I told you about the immune system, something that I have read, again, not an expert on it. All right? So just giving you some information that I have. Okay. So cancer screening can sometimes be done at home or at a doctor's office, and this is part of the curriculum. They want you as young, scientifically literate students and people to be able to understand that it's important to keep an eye on yourself, to check for any abnormalities, and be aware of this. Self-checks for breast cancer, testicular cancer, and skin cancer. And I'm not even going to talk about the first two, but we do have pictures in the textbook about the skin cancer, so I'll talk about that. So here we've got then a little image in the textbook. That's on page 50. If you've read through it, you've had a look. And it talks about, for looking at moles and various discolorations on your skin, the A, B, C, D method, asymmetry. Is it a symmetrical looking mole or has it got a funny looking shape? Funny looking shape isn't good. B, the border. Does it have kind of a smooth border, or is it got a very defined, jagged border as if the cells are starting to grow into that space? The jagged one is not so good. And color, does it look like a regular kind of mole color, or does it have some really off and changing colors within that particular same mole? The differing colors, again, not good. And then diameter, and that essentially means the size of it. If it's growing in size, not a good sign, all right? So you want to keep an eye on that type of stuff. And if you have any concerns, you definitely want to talk to a doctor about that. And that's part of this curriculum as well. And there's a nice image in there. If suspected, the tissue can be removed. It's called a biopsy and can be examined under a microscope. And essentially, they look under a much more expensive microscope than ours. And they're looking for, again, an abnormal number of cell divisions, right, taking place, and in order to determine whether it's cancerous or not. I'm not sure how they do that, because even if it's a benign tumor, there'll be a lot of growth. If it's malignant, there'd be growth as well. They've got to have some way in order to distinguish it. I don't have that knowledge. Yes, sir. Yep. Now, again, for skin cancer, I am not sure exactly how they deal with that. I can give you little bits of information about what I've seen on people that I know are being treated for it. I've seen where they've attempted to cut it out, right? Then you get a bandage. But if those cells are damaged, from the people that I know that have suffered from that, it's usually older people, and the skin doesn't grow back as easily and quickly as it does when you're young. So that sometimes results in problems. And I've also seen skin cancer being treated with chemotherapy. All right, so chemotherapy, we'll talk about this in a moment. Chemo simply means chemical, right? And so chemotherapy means you're treating it with chemicals to try to kill the growing cells. So I've heard of them having a topical cream of chemotherapy where you just put this cream on it, right? Which then, intensifies those chemicals that try to kill those cells in that area. I don't think I've ever heard of how heavy duty chemotherapy for people who maybe have larger tumors within their body, where they have to go to the hospital and get their chemotherapy injected right into their body. I don't think that they usually deal with skin cancer that way, unless it's been determined that it's starting to spread to other places. Because the problem with skin cancer is it may be beginning on the skin, but if some of those growing cells get deeper into the skin and get into the bloodstream and then are transported by the bloodstream to other places in the body, like lungs or other places, then that becomes the problem. I believe people who die of skin cancer, it's not the skin cancer anymore, but it's where the cancer goes afterwards. Yeah. Well, I'm sure you could. I'm not an expert. But again, a friend of mine, his father died of skin cancer, and in the end it was in his lungs, and so it was technically lung cancer when he died, right? So I'm not going to say you can't die of skin cancer. I don't have that knowledge directly, but I do know that of scenarios where that's what the situation was. Goodness gracious. Yes, I guess. But if you don't have all those cancerous cells that are within the bloodstream of the body or within the body killed, then it would probably redevelop. Again, I'm just on the edge of useful knowledge. I would have to look stuff up more if I needed that. Okay, so other ways in which we can diagnose cancer other than a biopsy, you can look at x-rays and look for tumors that way. Ultrasound. Ultrasound is a system, and I know this because this has to do with physics. It's a system that sends sound pulses into the body, and the sound will create an echo off of larger objects, different sized objects. It's not used for looking at bones, right? X-rays are used for looking at bones and really dense objects. Ultrasound looks at soft tissue, so if you had a tumor that was made up of softer cells, it would bounce off of there and you'd be able to see that. So you can look inside using ultrasound, which is essentially echo, kind of like an echolocation system. All right. CAT scans. CAT scans are also a form of X-ray. All right. But it's multiple X-rays that allow you to take pictures of slices of the patient. You don't actually have to slice the patient in half, but it takes a picture of a slice, and then it puts them together in a three-dimensional image within a computer, and you can get this three-dimensional kind of X-ray of the interior of the body. MRI. MRI stands for magnetic resonance imaging, and that uses a little trick that involves the hydrogen atoms in the substance that you're trying to take a picture of, and it essentially uses a really strong magnet to line up all the hydrogen atoms, because hydrogen atoms actually have an up and a down because of the way they spin. So if you can get all the hydrogen atoms to line up in a certain way, and then you hit the subject with some radio waves, whether it's a person or whether it's a chemical, you can get those hydrogen atoms to flip back the way they came, and that gives off a little bit of radiation, and you can see that. It's quite a complex system. If you continue on in chemistry, you will learn about magnetic resonance imagery. But again, it allows you to see the soft tissue, and again, all these slices, it allows you to see the whole thing in a three-dimensional image as picked up by the computer. All right? Yes? Can you see bones with it? If it's got hydrogen atoms on it, you can see it. Bones are primarily a calcium ionic compound. Maybe the marrow within the bones would be like a fat type compound, and fats do possess a lot of hydrogens, so you might not see the bones, but you'd be able to see the marrow. You know what I mean? The fatty part on the interior of the bone.
I had to have one.
Yeah. Again, what you can and cannot see in an MRI, I'm just basing that on what I learned in my chemistry courses. We had to use magnetic resonance imagery not to look at subjects, but to study the light that came off of various compounds that we put into it. It was just a little machine, right? It wasn't like a big, it was just because you put a sample in a test tube, you'd put it in the middle, and then you'd run the machine, and then you'd. So I do know it's the hydrogen atoms that are resulting in the imagery. So I guess technically if they don't have hydrogen atoms, then they're not going to produce an image for that particular device. And the calcium, I don't know what the other ion is in the bone structure. It's an ionic compound. It's calcium with something else. Could be phosphate, but again, I haven't checked that out. So that probably wouldn't give you an image. If a cancer diagnosis is made, there are many possible methods for treatment. And I actually have talked a little bit about this already, talking about the skin cancer. Surgical removal, if it's possible. If it's not up against very important structures, that they're not, that they're not being damaged as you remove it. Things like major blood vessels, right? If there's something up against there, it's difficult to remove it because you could damage those blood vessels. Chemotherapy stands for chemical therapy. It can be topical, like I said, on the skin. If it's skin cancer, it could be intravenous injection if it's trying to flood the body with, these chemicals to try to kill the cancer cells. And then radiation. And radiation therapy uses gamma radiation, the very high energy radiation that I talked about, and it tries to fire it at the tumor multiple ways in order to kill the tumor. Let me just show you a little bit. I might have mentioned this when I talked about gamma radiation. Did I talk about how I think I did. I'll do it again. So let's say this particular person has a tumor right there, all right? And that tumor needs to be killed by radiation. If you were to shine a lot of radiation on the entire body, then you would end up killing all the cells by radiation, and that wouldn't be good. You wouldn't want to kill all the cells. So what they do is, in the machine, the radiation device makes a beam, and what they'll do is they'll do an MRI, they'll locate where the tumor is, and then using the position of the tumor from the computer will fire a beam through the body, all right, hitting the tumor, and then the machine will rotate and fire it through like that. It'll rotate around, fire it through, fire it through, fire it through. It means the rest of the surrounding tissue only gets hit once, right? But the tumor itself gets hit multiple times, and that ideally, hopefully, kills some of the tumor cells, gets it small enough so that the body can take over and maybe hopefully clean up the rest, right? Yep.
Get cancer from that?
Yes, you can. Yep.
So wait, haven't we gotten more cancer from chemotherapy?
Again, I don't have absolute knowledge of it, but radiation does can result in a mutation by affecting a nucleus. And what scientists do is by taking samples of data from lots of patients, they can calculate what the chances are of getting cancer through radiation therapy, and they can calculate the chances of getting rid of the cancer through radiation therapy, and they can correlate that information together, and then a doctor can present a patient with the chances. All right, if we do nothing, you're going to die at that point in time. If we try radiation therapy, there's this much of a chance of you getting cancer more. There's this much of a chance of getting rid of it because they've done studies on it, and you weigh the chances and you make a decision as a patient. Yeah, yep. But you're right, the radiation can cause cancer, which is why you don't want to bombard the entire body with radiation. You only want to bombard the cancerous cells with radiation to kill those cancerous cells by over-radiating them, so much energy in them. You're essentially burning them, right? You're burning them up with the radiation that can go right through the body, and you're hopefully not damaging too many cells, all right? Again, I'll tell you a personal story. My sister-in-law, when she was fighting the cervical cancer, it had spread. I didn't get the information on where it had spread, but they were doing the radiation therapy. It was, one of the last kind of options, and it was literally burning her back because they were focusing on that area, and her back appeared as if it was burnt with heat, right? So there was damage being done to the surrounding cells. But it was near the point where they were running out of options. They had to try various things. So you take your chances on the treatment, right? So yeah, you are correct. The radiation can be cancer causing as well. Okay. Yes, that's good there. So what can we do? We can have healthy lifestyle choices. What's that? Oh, yeah. That's right. Like a little health class. Yeah, and that's what they want you to do with this in the biology stuff, again, for you guys in grade 10, because technically you only have to take 2 sciences, so this might be your last science course if you were not to go into any more science. So yes, we have to make it not just educational, but we're helping you out to make good life choices. And as you probably can tell by the tone of my voice, I am not that type of science teacher. I'm good at just giving you the science stuff. That's what I'm good at. Yes. Yep. So this whole idea of healthy lifestyle, exercise, healthy diet, avoiding cancer-causing toxins as much as possible, that kind of goes in line with, again, what I've read and what I've heard about the immune system. If your immune system is strong and your body is functioning the way it should be, then if a mutation takes place and your immune system is functioning well, then it can take care of that mutating cell before it gets itself established and causes any trouble, right? So I think that kind of goes in line with that particular idea, that theory. Is it true, this idea of the immune system? I don't know. Again, it's just kind of that information I've kind of gathered. It's what, in my mind, I believe is the way it works. Is it correct? I don't know. I don't have direct evidence, on that particular thing. Okay. Look at those vegetables. Look at that. Awesome. Okay, so I asked you to answer some questions, and if you took the time to answer some questions, there are some quick answers to those. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time. That's the end of my note, essentially. And so now at this point, I'm going to assign you the next kind of free reading for tomorrow's lesson, all right? And I'm going to show you a little entertaining 15-minute video on skin cancer, et cetera, et cetera. Actually, it's more on prevention of. These are the questions on page 55. Number one, how is the behavior of cancer cells different from normal cells? Cancer cells grow out of control and divide because the DNA of the cell is damaged. Number two, can a person inherit cancer genetically? Cancer can be inherited. It is not contagious. Where does it say? B, can you catch cancer from a person who has cancer? No, you can't. It is not contagious. Number three, what is a carcinogen? A carcinogen is a cancer-causing agent. Give some examples. Smoking, asbestos, UV rays, those would have all been in the note. Which one did we next? Number 6. Briefly describe the 3 main conventional methods for treating cancer: surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy. And number 8, identify 3 simple life changes that could help you reduce the risk of developing cancer: exercise, eat right, and wear sunscreen. All right? Okay? Now on my next slide, before I show you the video, is going to be the pre-reading for tomorrow's lesson. What's that? Oh, right here. Again, back on the same pages, just define the ones that are in bold. And they're the ones that are always in the margin, right? So I just want you to have a list of definitions of things like benign and malignant and carcinogen and that type of stuff. Oh, wait a minute. Copy your notes. No, that's not what I want. That's terrible. Oh, no, wait a minute. Specialized cells. We're doing stem cells? Yes, that is what I want. Yes. Yep. I'm confused. I'm going to stop this video.